The rust-colored dust of Outpost Delta 7 swirled in lazy eddies under the twin suns, coating everything in a fine, gritty film. It settled on the corrugated plastisteel roofs of the prefab habdomes, clung to the dented hulls of freighter transports resting silent on the ferrocrete landing pads, and found its way into every crevice, every joint, every weary sigh of the outpost's transient population. Here, at the frayed edge of colonized space, life existed in shades of gray and ochre, a place where pasts were shed like old skins and futures were traded for the price of a lukewarm synth ale. For Dr. Jason Rhys, it was less an exile and more a purgatory, a self-imposed sentence served in the anonymity of the fringe, his clinic. A squat structure nestled between a boisterous cantina belching discordant music and a perpetually grimy hydroparts dealer was his confessional, his sanctuary, and his cage. The sign above the door, once brightly proclaiming Rhys Medical Services, was now faded and streaked. The name barely legible beneath the relentless patina of Delta 77's unforgiving atmosphere. Inside, the air hummed with the low thrum of aging life support and the sterile scent of antiseptic fighting a losing battle against the pervasive dust. Jason moved with the quiet efficiency of long practice, organizing synth syringes and checking the charge levels on a diagnostic scanner whose casing was webbed with hairline cracks. He was a man sculpted by shadows, his face etched with lines that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens carried too long. Once, that face had graced the covers of xenobiology journals, lauded as one of the brightest minds in interspecies medicine. Now, it was merely the face of the local sawbones, the man you saw when a docking clamp slipped or a dispute in the cantina turned bloody. The notoriety, the accolades, the accusations that had driven him here, they were ghosts that whispered only in the dead hours of the twin sun night. He preferred it that way. Anonymity was a balm, silence a shield. The clinic door hissed open, admitting a gust of dust in the harsh, unfiltered sunlight. Jason didn't look up immediately, accustomed to the rough clientele of the outpost. Miners with lung ailments, spacers with radiation burns, prospectors nursing blaster wounds from claim disputes. He reached for a sterilizing wipe, his voice calm, measured. "Take a seat." What seems to be the trouble? It wasn't a question, more a statement of routine. A strained gasp answered him, followed by a soft thud. Jason turned, startled out of his practiced detachment. Sprawled on the worn floor just inside the doorway was not a grizzled miner or a swaggering spacer, but a figure utterly alien to the usual drab palette of Delta 7. A woman, tall and slender, with skin the impossible hue of a deep twilight sky, a vibrant, living blue that seemed to absorb the meager light. Her features were fine, elegant, yet marked by exhaustion and pain. She wore simple, dark traveling clothes that were torn and stained, suggesting a desperate flight rather than a casual arrival. Her breathing was shallow, ragged. Her eyes, large and the color of molten gold, fluttered weakly. Jason was across the small room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her, his medical instincts overriding the shock of her appearance. "Easy now," he murmured, his hands hovering, assessing. He recognized the species, though he'd only ever seen them in grainy archive footage and cautionary bulletins during his academy days. Valari, a species legendary, feared, whispered about in hushed tones across the settled systems. Their physiology was a biological enigma, their temperament reportedly volatile, their most terrifying attribute the substance they produced when under duress. Tears. Not saline, not water, but a potent bioagent capable of corroding metal, searing synth fabric, inflicting horrific chemical burns on most known life forms. Contact was universally warned against. Avoidance was standard protocol. But this Valari was injured, collapsing in his clinic. Protocol be damned. He gently probed the side of her neck, searching for a pulse point analogous to human physiology. Her skin was cool to the touch, smooth as polished obsidian. He found a steady, albeit faint, rhythm beneath the blue integument. Her eyes flickered open again, fixing on him with an unnerving intensity, a mixture of fear and something else, something unreadable. A low groan escaped her lips, and her hand clutched at her side. Jason followed her gesture, carefully easing aside the torn fabric of her tunic. A ragged wound marred the perfect blue skin, oozing a dark, viscous fluid. It wasn't a simple laceration. It looked like a burn, deliberately inflicted, viciously deep. "Who did this to you?" he asked softly, reaching for his med scanner. The device whirred, casting pale blue light over the wound, its sensors analyzing tissue damage, searching for foreign contaminants. The readout flickered with complex, unfamiliar biological markers, struggling to categorize the Valari physiology against its predominantly human-calibrated database. It flagged severe cellular disruption, cauterized nerve endings, and traces of an unknown energy signature. An assassin's work, precise and brutal. The Valari woman tried to speak, her voice a low, melodious hum that ended in a pained cough. Her eyes welled up. Jason tensed instinctively, remembering the warnings, the horrifying holovids of Valari tears melting through armored bulkheads. He prepared to pull back, to shield himself, but he hesitated. She was helpless, wounded, seeking refuge. He couldn't abandon her. He watched, morbidly fascinated, as two tears, like liquid sapphires, welled and spilled, tracing shimmering paths down her blue cheeks. They dripped from her chin. One landed squarely on the back of his hand, resting near her side. He braced for the searing pain, the chemical burn described in every report. Nothing happened. There was only a peculiar warmth, a tingling sensation, utterly unlike the corrosive horror he expected. He stared, bewildered. The tear didn't dissolve his skin. Instead, as he watched, its liquid form seemed to shimmer, then hardened, coalescing into a small, multifaceted crystal. It lay on his skin like a fallen star. Cool now, perfectly formed, radiating a faint internal light. It was beautiful, intricate. A flawless jewel birthed from a substance fabled for its destructive power. He picked it up gingerly. It felt solid, smooth, strangely resonant against his fingertips. The second tear landed on the furrowcrete floor beside her. There was a sharp hiss, a plume of acrid smoke, and the distinct smell of ozone. Where the tear had touched the floor, a small pit now marred the surface. The edges blackened and melted, corrosive, deadly, just as the legends described. But not on him, not on human skin. Why? Before he could process this profound anomaly, the clinic door hissed open again, more violently this time. Two figures filled the frame, silhouetted against the harsh glare of the twin suns. They were clad in reinforced environment suits, bulky and menacing, their faces obscured by polarized visors. Blaster rifles were held at the ready, sweeping the small space with cold, professional efficiency. Bounty hunters, or worse. Their posture screamed authority, the kind that didn't bother with local jurisdiction. Dr. Rhys, the lead figure's voice crackled through an external speaker, flat and devoid of emotion. "We know she's here. Hand over the Valari fugitive. Cooperation will be noted. Resistance will be counterproductive." Jason's mind raced. Fugitive. That explained the desperation, the assassin's wound. She was running from someone powerful, someone who employed ruthless hunters. He looked down at the Valari woman, her golden eyes wide with terror. Then, at the small, impossible crystal still resting in his palm, he thought of the melted pit in his floor. He thought of the corrosive tears that became jewels on his skin. He thought of his own exile, his own status as a man outside the system's grace. Reason. Caution. Every survival instinct screamed at him to comply, to step aside, to let them take her. Delta 7 was a place where you learned to look the other way, to mind your own business, especially when heavily armed professionals came calling. But looking at the vulnerable figure on his floor, the strange connection forged by that harmless, crystalline tear, Jason felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Defiance. A spark of the man he used to be, the one who believed in something more than just survival. He made a decision, swift and potentially suicidal. He subtly shifted his weight, blocking their direct line of sight to the Valari woman, now identified only as Kaelira in his thoughts, the name seeming to echo the musical quality of her voice. "There seems to be some mistake," Jason said, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. He held up his hands slowly, palms out, just finishing up with a patient who had a bad reaction to some local fungus. Nasty stuff. Causes hallucinations. The lead hunter took a step inside, the barrel of his rifle unwavering. "No mistake, doctor. Thermal scans don't hallucinate. We tracked her energy signature directly to this location. Move aside." Jason didn't move. He met the impassive visor, his gaze level. "This is a medical facility under Outer Rim neutrality statutes. You have no authority here without a warrant sanctioned by the Delta Combine." It was a weak bluff. Statutes on Delta 7 were enforced more by firepower than principle. But it was all he had. The second hunter raised his rifle. "Last chance. Doctor." Jason glanced down at Kaelira. Her eyes pleaded with him. The crystal in his hand felt warm again. He thought of the melted floor. An idea, reckless and desperate, formed. He needed a diversion, a way out. He needed chaos. "Kaelira," he whispered urgently, hoping she understood Standard Galactic. Can you cry again? Aim for their weapons, their suits." She stared at him, confusion warring with fear in her golden eyes. Then, perhaps seeing the resolve in his face, or perhaps simply overwhelmed by terror, her eyes welled once more. This time, the tears flowed freely. Twin streams of liquid sapphire. She turned her head slightly, her gaze locking onto the bounty hunters. With a choked sob, the tears dripped, arsing through the air. The hunters reacted instantly, recognizing the danger, raising their arms to shield their visors. But the tears weren't aimed at their faces. One splashed against the barrel of the lead hunter's rifle. There was a violent sizzle, a shower of sparks, and the metal warped and blackened. The weapon rendered useless in an instant. The second tear struck the chest plate of the other hunter's suit. It didn't burn through immediately. The reinforced material offered some resistance, but it adhered, smoking, rapidly degrading the composite layers with an audible crackling sound. The hunter staggered back, slapping at his chest in panic, shouting curses muffled by his helmet. That was the opening Jason needed. He kicked over a tall metal stand, laden with medical instruments, sending scalpels, forceps, and sterilizer canisters clattering across the floor, creating a momentary obstacle. "Back door! Now!" he yelled at Kaelira, grabbing her arm and hauling her upright. She cried out in pain as her side wound protested, but adrenaline and fear lent her strength. He half dragged, half supported her towards the rear exit, a flimsy panel leading to a narrow, refuse-choked alleyway behind the clinic. The remaining functional hunter recovered quickly, firing a stun bolt that sizzled past Jason's ear, impacting the wall where Kaelira had been moments before. Jason shoved Kaelira through the back door and slammed his palm onto the emergency lock control, sealing it, just as another bolt slammed into the reinforced metal. Heavy thuds resonated from the other side as the hunters tried to force it open. They stumbled into the alley. The stench of stale refuse and chemical runoff thick in the air. Kaelira leaned heavily against him, her breathing ragged. "Thank you," she gasped, the words laced with pain but clear. She did understand Standard. "Don't thank me yet," Jason grunted, pulling her along. "They won't give up easily. We need to get off Delta 7. He glanced back at the sealed door, knowing it wouldn't hold for long. His quiet exile had just ended in a hail of blaster fire and corrosive tears. He was a fugitive again. This time, with an alien fugitive whose tears could melt steel but turn to jewels on his skin. The absurdity, the sheer impossibility of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so deadly serious. They plunged deeper into the labyrinthine alleys of the outpost, two desperate figures swallowed by the encroaching shadows of the twin sunset, leaving behind a small, smoking pit in a clinic floor and a single, impossibly beautiful crystal lying forgotten amidst the chaos. The alleys of Delta 7 were a disorienting maze, designed more by chance and accretion than by any rational plan. Rickety gantries crisscrossed overhead, dripping foul liquids. Pipes snaked along walls, venting steam and noxious fumes. The ground underfoot was uneven, littered with discarded tech, broken synth crates, and the general detritus of lives lived precariously on the fringe. Jason navigated them with the familiarity born of years spent deliberately losing himself in their anonymity, pulling Kaelira close, her taller frame occasionally stumbling on the uneven terrain. Her breathing was still labored, and he could feel the tremors of pain racking her body each time she put weight on her injured side. "We need to find somewhere safe, just for a short while," Jason said, his voice low and urgent, scanning the intersecting pathways ahead. "I need to treat that wound properly. And we need a plan." Kaelira nodded, her golden eyes scanning their surroundings with a wariness that suggested she was no stranger to being hunted. "They will not stop," she murmured, her voice a low thrum that vibrated faintly against his arm. "The Order wants me silenced. Permanently." "The Order?" Jason questioned, pulling her into the deeper shadow of an overhanging support beam as the distant sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the direction they had come. "Who are they?" "Valari," she replied, her voice tight. "Enforcers. Extremists. They believe my condition is an aberration, a threat to our kind." Her condition. The tears. Jason thought of the crystal, still tucked safely into a pocket of his medical tunic. An aberration that turned deadly acid into priceless gems on contact with his skin. What did that mean? Before he could ask, a high-pitched whine cut through the alley's ambient noise. A seeker drone, small and fast, zipped past the opening of their alley, its optical sensor sweeping the area. "Move," Jason urged, pulling her deeper into the warren. They ducked behind a stack of discarded fuel cells, the smell of ozone sharp in the air. The drone paused, hovered, then continued on its patrol route. Close. Too close. They found temporary refuge in the abandoned lower level of a decommissioned ore processing unit, a cavernous space filled with rusting machinery and thick shadows. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of decay. Jason activated a small lumen sphere, casting a pool of cool white light. He helped Kaelira sit down, her back against a grimy metal pillar. "All right, Let's look at that wound again, he said, opening the med kit he'd managed to grab before fleeing the clinic. He carefully cleaned the area around the burn, his touch gentle but efficient. Kaelira flinched, but remained silent, her gaze fixed on his face, observing his every move. You are different, human, she said softly, breaking the silence. Your touch, it does not burn. Jason paused, meeting her gaze. Your tears, they didn't harm me either. They became this. He pulled out the crystal. It caught the light of the lumen sphere, fracturing it into a dozen tiny rainbows. Kaelira stared at it, her expression shifting from pain to astonishment, then to something akin to awe. It is as the scrolls foretold, she whispered, reaching out a tentative blue finger to touch the crystal. The catalyst. The human bridge. Scrolls. Catalyst. What are you talking about? Jason pressed, applying a bioregenerative patch to her wound. The patch hissed softly as it adhered, flooding the damaged tissue with nanites programmed for cellular repair. Kaelira took a deep breath, wincing slightly as the patch began its work. Among my people, there are ancient prophecies, dismissed by the Order as myth. They speak of a time of great darkness approaching, a shadow that consumes stars, and they speak of a symbiosis, a merging of Valari and human, foreseen millennia ago. A Valari whose tears do not conform, and a human whose biology can interface. She gestured towards the crystal in his hand. My tears are unstable, different from others of my kind. They react unpredictably, violently. It is why I was exiled. But the prophecy said, my tears would find their balance, their true purpose. Through contact with the foretold human, they would crystallize, not destroy. They would become a key. Jason stared at her, trying to reconcile the pragmatic reality of their situation, hunted, wounded, trapped on a dusty outpost, with the cosmic scale of ancient prophecies and star-consuming shadows. Exiled. They sent you out here knowing this. Not exactly, Kaelira admitted, her gaze dropping. The elders who still believed in the scrolls arranged my escape. They tasked me with finding evidence, with locating the human catalyst, if he existed. They hoped proof might sway the Order, unite our people against the coming darkness the prophecies warned of. But the Order discovered the plan. They sent assassins first, then the hunters. They want to erase the prophecy, and me along with it. Jason felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air of the processing unit. Assassins, enforcers, prophecies, a potential galactic threat, and somehow, he, Jason Rhys, disgraced xenobiologist hiding from his own past, was tangled in the middle of it. Why me? How could you possibly know I was the one? Kaelira looked at him, her golden eyes seeming to pierce through his carefully constructed defenses. I didn't know. Not until my tears touched you. The scrolls described a specific bioresonance, a unique genetic marker within the human catalyst's DNA that would neutralize the inherent instability of Valari bioagents. Your body, it reacted exactly as predicted. It completed the equation. She paused, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The prophecies also mentioned the catalyst would be a healer, yet carry a great burden from his past. Someone lost. Her words struck a chord deep within him. A healer burdened by his past. Lost. It was an uncannily accurate description of the man he had become. He remembered the scandal, the trumped-up charges of stealing rare xenobiological samples, the research data confiscated, his reputation ruined. He hadn't stolen anything. He'd stumbled upon evidence of illegal genetic weaponization research conducted by a powerful military contractor, Biogen Corp. They had framed him to silence him, forcing him to flee to the fringes, trading his groundbreaking research for the anonymity of Delta 7. Could his stolen research, his specialized knowledge of xenobiology, somehow be connected to this? Was his burden the very thing that made him the catalyst? My past is complicated, Jason admitted gruffly, sealing the bandage over the regenerative patch. I was a xenobiologist, specialized in interspecies genetic compatibility, until certain people decided my work was inconvenient. Kaelira nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Then perhaps it is not chance that brought us together, Jason Rhys. Before they could delve deeper into the unsettling implications, a new sound intruded, the low, guttural thrum of engines approaching. Not from the alleys, but from above. Searchlights stabbed down through gaps in the corroded ceiling, sweeping across the dusty machinery. They brought in atmospheric craft, Jason muttered, extinguishing the lumen sphere, plunging them back into near darkness. They're widening the search grid. We can't stay here. Where can we go? Kaelira asked, trying to rise, her hand instinctively going to her side. Jason scanned the darkened space. His gaze fell upon an old maintenance conduit, half hidden behind a stack of rusted girders. It was small, cramped, likely leading down into the deeper sublevels of the old processing unit, perhaps even connecting to the abandoned mining tunnels that riddled the rock beneath the outpost. There. It's not ideal, but it might get us out of the immediate search area. He helped her towards the conduit, prying open the corroded access panel with a grunt of effort. Cold, stale air rushed out. It won't be comfortable, he warned. Comfort is a luxury I cannot afford, Kaelira replied, her voice steady despite the pain he knew she must be feeling. She looked at the crystal he still held. Keep that safe, Jason Rhys. The scrolls say it is more than just a jewel. It is a guide. A guide to what? He didn't have time to ask. The sound of boots landing on metal grating echoed from the level above. The hunters were closing in, with a shared look of grim determination. Jason helped Kaelira into the narrow conduit, then squeezed in after her, pulling the panel shut just as flashlight beams sliced through the space they had vacated. They were plunged into absolute darkness, the only sounds the rasp of their own breathing and the faint, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very rock around them. The deep, forgotten pulse of Delta 77's underbelly. Their flight had truly begun, a desperate journey into the unknown, guided by prophecy and pursued by enemies from two different worlds, bound by a connection neither of them fully understood. The conduit was suffocatingly narrow, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees over surfaces slick with decades of accumulated grime and condensation. The air was cold and stagnant, thick with the smell of decay and damp earth. Jason led the way, his small lumen sphere providing just enough light to avoid the worst of the obstacles: fallen pipes, jagged metal shards, pools of murky water. Behind him, Kaelira moved with a determined silence, her breathing occasionally hitching with pain, but she made no complaint. Hours seemed to pass in the disorienting darkness, the only measure of time the growing ache in Jason's muscles and the fatigue pulling at Kaelira's movements. They spoke little, conserving energy, listening intently for any sound of pursuit. The distant thrumming they'd heard earlier grew steadily louder, resolving into the low-frequency vibrations of heavy machinery operating somewhere deep beneath the outpost. Mining operations, long abandoned according to official records, but the vibrations suggested otherwise. Delta 7, like many fringe worlds, held secrets beneath its dusty surface. Finally, the conduit widened, opening into a larger tunnel carved directly from the rock. The air here was slightly fresher, carrying the scent of minerals and excavated stone. Faint emergency lighting flickered intermittently along the tunnel walls, revealing old rail tracks disappearing into the darkness in both directions. It was part of the old mining network. We need rest, Jason said, helping Kaelira lean against the tunnel wall. Her face was pale beneath its blue hue, lines of pain etched around her eyes, despite the work of the regenerative patch. He checked the bandage it was holding, but the exertion was clearly taking its toll. And we need supplies. Water, energy packs. My clinic stores are gone. Kaelira nodded wearily. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, a single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Jason instinctively held out his hand. The tear landed softly on his palm, and once again, the strange warmth spread through his skin before the liquid solidified into another perfect, luminous crystal, slightly larger than the first. It happens whenever I feel strong emotion now, she murmured, looking at the gem in his hand with a mixture of wonder and apprehension, fear, relief, even gratitude. She met his eyes. The connection between us, it facilitates the transformation, stabilizes it. Jason examined the new crystal alongside the first. They were similar yet distinct, like variations on a theme. He remembered what she'd said about the crystal being a guide. Guide us where? Kaelira. She closed her eyes again, concentrating, her brow furrowed slightly. There is an energy, a resonance, coming from the crystal. It feels like a map. Faint, fragmented, but pointing deeper, down. She gestured along the tunnel into the echoing darkness. And there's something else, a name, whispering, Ethelgard. Ethelgard, Jason repeated. The name meant nothing to him. Is that a place, a person? I don't know, Kaelira admitted, looking troubled. It feels ancient, connected to the source of the resonance. Could this Ethelgard be related to the precursors? The beings Kaelira mentioned, who supposedly engineered their species. It seemed impossibly far-fetched, yet the crystals in his hand felt undeniably real. Their faint inner light pulsing in time with the deep vibrations of the tunnels. He looked at Kaelira, her exhaustion evident. Prophecies and ancient whispers would have to wait. Survival came first. All right, Jason decided, let's follow the tracks deeper for a short way. Find a more defensible spot to rest. Then, I'll need to risk heading back towards the lower levels of the outpost. See if I can scavenge some supplies without attracting attention. It is too dangerous for you. Kaelira protested weakly. The hunters. Staying here without supplies is just as dangerous. Jason countered gently. We need to be smart about this. Rest first, then I'll go. You wait here. They moved cautiously along the tunnel, the flickering emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows. The rail tracks suggested this tunnel had once been a major thoroughfare for ore carts. After about 20 minutes, they found a side alcove, partially collapsed, but offering cover from the main tunnel. It was shielded from view and provided a bottleneck entrance they could watch. Jason used remnants of his medkit to make Kaelira as comfortable as possible, offering her the last of his emergency water ration. She took it gratefully, her movements slow. Fatigue was clearly setting in. Sleep, he urged. I'll keep watch for a while. Kaelira hesitated, then nodded, curling up carefully on the dusty floor, her hand resting protectively over her injured side. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her, her breathing evening out into the slow rhythm of sleep. Jason sat near the entrance of the alcove, his senses on high alert, the two tear crystals resting heavy in his pocket. The silence of the tunnel pressed in, broken only by Kaelira's soft breathing and the ever-present subterranean thrum. His mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments. Valari enforcers, human bounty hunters or military, ancient prophecies, a star-consuming void, his own framed past, and Kaelira, the blue-skinned alien whose tears held impossible power, and the crystals. They felt significant. Holding them produced a faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated deep in his bones. He pulled one out, turning it over in the dim light. It seemed to pulse faintly, the internal light waxing and waning in rhythm with the tunnel vibrations, a guide pointing deeper, towards Ithelgard. He thought about his past research, the work Biogen Corp had stolen and twisted. He had been on the verge of understanding certain cross-species genetic triggers, resonant frequencies that could activate dormant DNA sequences. Could the Valari tears, stabilized by his specific human biochemistry, be emitting such a frequency? Could the crystals be acting as beacons, tuned to something ancient buried beneath Delta 7? It was wild speculation, bordering on fantasy. Yet the evidence was literally in his hand. As Kaelira slept, Jason found his own exhaustion weighing heavily. He hadn't slept properly since before her arrival. He allowed himself to drift, leaning his head back against the cold rock, his hand never far from the salvaged vibro knife tucked into his boot, his ears straining against the silence. Images flickered behind his closed eyelids, the sterile labs of his past, the accusing eyes of the military tribunal, the swirling dust of Delta 7, Kaelira's terrified golden eyes, the impossible beauty of the crystallizing tears. He awoke with a start hours later, unsure what had disturbed him. Kaelira was still asleep, her breathing undisturbed. The tunnel was silent, the thrumming unchanged. Yet, he felt a prickling unease. He crept to the edge of the alcove, peering cautiously into the main tunnel. Nothing. Just the flickering lights and the endless dark. He listened intently, faintly, very faintly. He heard it, the scrape of a boot on rock, far down the tunnel, back the way they had come. They hadn't shaken their pursuers, or perhaps a new threat had entered the equation. He cursed silently. He couldn't risk scavenging supplies now. They had to keep moving. He gently shook Kaelira awake. "Trouble?" she asked immediately, her eyes snapping open, instantly alert. "Maybe," Jason whispered. "Heard something. We need to go deeper into the tunnels. Follow that resonance you felt." Kaelira nodded, pushing herself upright with a controlled grimace of pain. She took a moment, closing her eyes, holding the crystal Jason offered her. "Yes," she confirmed after a moment. "The signal is clearer now. This way." She pointed further down the tunnel, away from the direction of the faint noise. They set off again, moving as quickly and quietly as Kaelira's injury allowed. The tunnel began to slope downwards more steeply, the rock walls changing texture, showing signs of deliberate shaping. Smoother surfaces interspersed with panels of unfamiliar, non-metallic material that seemed to absorb the light. The air grew warmer, cleaner, the low thrumming intensifying, becoming a palpable vibration beneath their feet. "This is not standard mining construction," Jason observed, running his hand over one of the smooth, dark panels. It felt cool and faintly resonant. "This is something else, something older. The precursors," Kaelira breathed, her eyes wide with awe as she looked around. "The resonance. It's leading us to one of their installations." The tunnel opened abruptly into a vast cavern, far larger than any mining excavation ought to be. The source of the thrumming was immediately apparent. In the center of the cavern stood a colossal structure of the same dark, non-reflective material as the tunnel panels, pulsating with a soft internal luminescence. Geometric lines and patterns shifted across its surface, intricate and alien. It was clearly artificial, ancient, and utterly unlike any human or known alien technology. Pipes and conduits, thick as starfreighter fuel lines, snaked out from its base, disappearing into the rock walls. humming with contained power. The air here was warm, circulated by an unseen system, carrying a faint scent like ozone and rain. Ethelgard, Kaelira whispered, her voice filled with reverence. This must be it. As they stepped fully into the cavern, lights embedded in the ceiling flickered to life, illuminating the space more fully. They weren't harsh utility lights, but soft, ambient panels that revealed the sheer scale of the place. Walkways spiraled up the central structure, and alcoves lined the cavern walls, some holding dormant machinery, others dark and empty. It was a place of immense power, sleeping beneath a forgotten outpost on the edge of space. Suddenly, alarms blared, soft, melodic chimes rather than jarring claxons, echoing through the cavern. Lights flashed rhythmically on the central structure. They had triggered a silent security system. "We've been detected," Jason said unnecessarily, pulling Kaelira towards the cover of one of the alcoves. Before they could reach it, multiple portals shimmered into existence around the cavern, not physical doors, but shimmering fields of energy. From them emerged figures that were definitely not human bounty hunters. They were Valari, clad in sleek, form-fitting silvery armor, their movements precise and coordinated. They carried sophisticated energy weapons, their golden eyes scanning the cavern, quickly locking onto Jason and Kaelira. These were the Order enforcers Kaelira had warned him about. Kaelira, the lead Valari's voice was sharp, commanding, amplified by his helmet. "Surrender the aberration. You cannot defile this sacred place with your flawed existence. And this, human." His gaze flickered towards Jason with undisguised contempt. "This place holds the key to our survival. Commander Valerius." Kaelira called back, standing straighter, her voice ringing with newfound conviction, despite her injury. "The prophecies are true. The human is the catalyst." Valerius laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Myths and madness. Your tears are a dangerous mutation, a weakness. And this human," he gestured dismissively at Jason, "is nothing. An anomaly to be sterilized. Seize them!" The Valari enforcers advanced, weapons raised. Jason pushed Kaelira behind him, his hand reaching for the vibro knife. It was hopelessly inadequate against energy weapons and armored soldiers. But it was all he had. He braced himself for the inevitable. Suddenly, Kaelira cried out, stumbling forward. Not from pain this time, but from disorientation. She clutched her head, her eyes wide. The structure. It's responding. To the crystals. As she spoke, the two tear crystals in Jason's pocket flared with intense light, becoming almost too hot to hold. The central structure in the cavern pulsed in unison, the shifting patterns on its surface accelerating, coalescing into complex symbols and diagrams that Jason vaguely recognized as stellar cartography mixed with intricate biological helixes. A low, powerful hum filled the cavern, resonating deep within their bones. The advancing Valari paused, momentarily distracted by the unexpected display. A beam of focused light shot from the central structure, striking the cavern floor directly in front of Jason and Kaelira. The rock dissolved, reforming instantly into a raised platform, depicting a swirling galaxy map. A single star system pulsed brightly at the edge of the map, far beyond known Valari or human space. Below it, symbols flashed rapidly. A Valari figure, a human figure, joined by an intricate energy pattern. "It recognizes us," Kaelira breathed, staring at the map. "It's showing us. The Nexus." "Nexus?" Jason asked, still wary of the surrounding enforcers. "Another name from the scrolls," Kaelira explained quickly. "An ancient meeting place, a control center perhaps. The convergence point for the activation." Valerius seemed momentarily stunned by the ancient technology's response. but his fanaticism quickly reasserted itself. Precursor tricks. Do not be swayed. She is the aberration, the human a contamination. Destroy them both. Secure the installation. The enforcers opened fire. Beams of crackling energy lanced towards Jason and Kaelira. Instinctively, Jason pulled Kaelira down, shielding her with his own body as energy bolts seared the rock around them. He felt a sharp pain in his shoulder as a glancing hit burned through his tunic. He gritted his teeth, expecting the Valari to press their advantage. But the ancient installation intervened. Defensive systems, dormant for millennia, flared to life. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing energy emitters that fired precise beams, intercepting the Valari shots, creating dazzling displays of light and energy discharge. Automated sentinels, sleek, hovering spheres of the same dark material as the central structure, emerged from hidden compartments, targeting the enforcers with non-lethal stun pulses. The Valari, caught completely by surprise, were thrown into disarray, their disciplined formation breaking as they scrambled to defend themselves against the installation's automated defenses. The place, it's protecting us, Jason stammered, astonished. It recognizes the catalyst and the key, Kaelira said, looking from Jason to the glowing crystals he held. It knows our purpose, even if we don't fully grasp it. Amidst the chaos of energy beams and stunned Valari soldiers, the galaxy map on the platform shifted. The coordinates for the pulsing Nexus system solidified, accompanied by a complex activation sequence schematic that seemed to involve both biological and energy signatures. We have to get out of here, Jason urged, helping Kaelira up. While they're occupied, he glanced towards the tunnel they'd entered from, but Valerius and a couple of his guards were already regrouping near the entrance, cutting off that escape route. Other portals flickered at the edges of the cavern, suggesting more reinforcements might arrive. Suddenly, another energy field shimmered into existence near them, different from the Valari portals. Harsher utilitarian. Figures stepped through, clad not in sleek Valari armor, but in standard human military combat gear, insignia identifying them as belonging to the sector fleet garrison. They carried pulse rifles and deployed containment field generators. Target identified, a gruff voice barked. Biosignature confirmed. Secure the assets. Lethal force authorized against hostiles. Assets. Plural. They weren't just after Kaelira, they were after him too. Biogen Corp must have put out a high-level alert when his presence triggered whatever flags they had on him after the frame-up. Or perhaps Kaelira's arrival on Delta 7. Combined with his known presence had tripped some algorithm searching for exactly this kind of interspecies anomaly. They wanted to weaponize the connection, the tear crystals, the strange compatibility. Now they were caught between Valari fanatics who wanted Kaelira dead and him sterilized, and a human military force that saw them as exploitable biological assets. Both sides were converging, ignoring the ancient installation's defenses in their determination to capture them. The cavern became a chaotic three-way firefight. Valari energy beams clashing with human pulse rifle fire and the installation's defensive blasts. There, Kaelira pointed towards one of the dark alcoves lining the cavern wall. Unlike the others, this one seemed to pulse with a faint resonance. Similar to the central structure, that feels like an exit, a transport conduit. It was their only chance. Jason grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the alcove as stray shots sizzled dangerously close. They dodged stunned Valari enforcers and bursts of pulse fire from the human soldiers. Reaching the alcove, they found no visible door, just a smooth wall of the dark, precursor material. "How do we open it?" Jason yelled over the din of battle. Kaelira pressed her hand against the wall. Nothing happened. She looked at Jason, then at the crystals he clutched. Together, she urged. And the crystals. They're the key. Jason pressed his hand next to hers, sandwiching the two warm, pulsing tear crystals between their palms and the strange wall. The effect was instantaneous. The wall shimmered, becoming momentarily transparent, revealing a tunnel filled with swirling patterns of light. A powerful wave of energy surged through them, not painful, but profoundly deep. A feeling of connection, of activation. It resonated outwards, causing the central structure to flare even brighter, briefly stunning everyone in the cavern. Without hesitation, they stepped through the shimmering portal just as Valerius, recovering, bellowed orders to fire. The portal snapped shut behind them, cutting off the sounds of battle, plunging them into a silent, rushing torrent of light and energy. They were traveling, moving faster than any ship, pulled along an unseen pathway towards the coordinates displayed on the cavern map, towards the mystery of the Nexus, leaving their pursuers momentarily thwarted, but undoubtedly furious. Trapped within the newly awakened precursor installation of Ethelgard, the transit through the precursor conduit was unlike anything Jason had ever experienced. It wasn't physical travel in the conventional sense. There was no G-force, no sense of inertia, just a feeling of being disassembled and reassembled atom by atom, carried on a current of pure energy and light. Colors unknown to the human eye streamed past. Intricate geometric patterns unfolded and collapsed in fractions of a second. He felt Kaelira's presence beside him, not just her physical hand gripped tightly in his, but a deeper awareness, a mental and emotional resonance that seemed amplified by the conduit's energy field and the pulsing crystals they still held between their palms, fragments of her fear, her determination, her awe, mingled with his own weary resolve and dawning wonder. The shared experience forged a silent intimacy, a bond deepening beyond the mere fact of their compatible biologies. The journey lasted only moments, though it felt like an eternity compressed. Abruptly, the swirling light subsided, resolving into solidity. They stood on a platform of the same dark, seamless material as the Ethelgard installation, the portal vanishing behind them. They were no longer in a subterranean cavern, but in a vast, open space filled with stars, except they weren't truly exposed to vacuum. A containment field, perfectly transparent, held a breathable atmosphere, recycling the air with a whisper, quiet efficiency. They were inside a colossal structure, a space station of truly ancient design and staggering scale. Graceful, kilometers-long spars extended outwards from a central core, glowing with soft internal light. Crystalline domes dotted the structure, revealing glimpses of park-like environments within. Smaller vessels, clearly automated drones of precursor design, moved silently between the spars on predetermined paths. Far below their platform, nebulae swirled in breathtaking colors, and distant galaxies glittered like scattered diamond dust. It was beautiful, majestic, and radiated an aura of immense, patient power. The Nexus, Kaelira breathed, her voice hushed with reverence. It is real. The platform they stood on was part of a larger receiving chamber, empty except for a single console rising from the floor nearby. As they approached, the console shimmered to life, displaying symbols similar to those seen in Ethelgard, shifting and resolving into readable Standard Galactic, interspersed with Valari script. Welcome. Keystone Pair. The synthesized voice emanated from the console, calm and genderless. Designations: Valari Sequence 7, Human Sequence 12. Biological resonance confirmed. Threat assessment protocol initiated. Your arrival has triggered Nexus Primary Activation Sequence, Stage 1. Keystone Pair. Jason repeated, looking at Kaelira, whose golden eyes were wide with shock and understanding. Sequence 7. Sequence 12. The prophecies spoke of engineered species, Kaelira explained, her mind clearly racing to connect the pieces. Paired sequences, designed by the precursors. We are not the only ones. Jason, it seems there are others. The console display shifted, showing a complex diagram. It depicted the Valari and human species, highlighting specific genetic markers within their respective DNA, markers Jason recognized with a jolt as being related to the very sequences Biogen Corp had been illegally researching, the work he had been framed for uncovering. The diagram showed how these sequences, when brought into proximity, especially under conditions of biological transfer, like Kaelira's tears on his skin, created a unique energy signature. This signature, the console explained, was the key required to interface with precursor technology. This station, the Nexus, the console continued, is the central hub of a galaxy-wide defensive network, constructed cycles ago by the originators, your precursors, to counteract cyclical entropic cascades. Entropic cascades, Jason asked. You mean the star-consuming shadow Kaelira mentioned? Affirmative, the console replied. A phenomenon designated the void, a wave of null energy expanding from galactic core regions, neutralizing fundamental forces, effectively erasing matter and energy from existence. Analysis indicates a cascade event is currently in progress and accelerating towards this sector. A star chart appeared, showing a terrifyingly large expanse of blackness encroaching on the known galaxy map, swallowing star systems whole. Kaelira gasped, horrified by the scale of the threat. Can it be stopped? The Nexus network was designed for this purpose, the console stated. It generates a harmonic resonance barrier, stabilizing space-time fabric against the cascade. Full activation requires the synchronized biological and energetic input of a designated keystone pair at the primary amplification core. The console displayed a new schematic, a central chamber deep within the Nexus, containing a massive crystalline structure. The schematic showed two figures, unmistakably Valari and human, channeling energy into the core. It depicted not just proximity, but a complete merging, a union of their distinct biologies, a full merging, Jason murmured, understanding the implication. The activation wasn't just about holding hands and touching crystals. It required a profound physical connection, a complete biological interface between him and Kaelira. The resonance generated by their combined, unique life energies was the final component needed to power the galactic shield. Their compatibility wasn't just an anomaly, it was the solution. We are meant to do this, Kaelira asked, looking at Jason, her expression a mixture of fear, duty, and something deeper, an emotion that mirrored the growing connection he felt towards her. It appears so, Jason said quietly. The weight of their responsibility settled upon him, heavier than any burden he had carried before. Saving a galaxy rested on the shoulders of a fugitive doctor and an exiled alien, bound by prophecy and biology. Before they could fully absorb the magnitude of their task, warning klaxons, different from the gentle chimes of Ethelgard, blared through the Nexus. Red alert icons flashed on the console. Warning. Unauthorized subspace transit detected approaching Nexus perimeter. Multiple signatures. Valari order vessels. Human Federation cruisers. They followed us. Jason swore under his breath, or tracked the energy signature from the conduit activation. Nexus defensive systems engaging, the console announced. External views flashed on the screen, showing Valari warships and blocky human military cruisers emerging from ripples in space-time. just outside the station's perimeter. Energy beams lanced out from the Nexus, impacting invisible shields around the attacking vessels. The station was defending itself, but it was clearly outnumbered, and its primary function wasn't warfare. "How do we get to the amplification core?" Jason demanded. The console displayed a complex pathway through the station's interior. Access requires keystone authorization at multiple junctures. Proceed immediately. The network must be activated before the void reaches critical proximity, or the Nexus defenses are overwhelmed. "Let's go," Jason said, taking Kaelira's hand again. The warmth of the crystals, still held between them, seemed to flow up his arm, a reassuring pulse of energy. They turned and ran, following the illuminated path indicators that now lit up along the corridor leading away from the receiving chamber, plunging deeper into the heart of the ancient space station. While outside, the battle for the Nexus raged, and beyond that, the silent, inexorable darkness of the void crept closer. The corridors of the Nexus were vast and eerily silent, lined with the same dark, seamless material that seemed to absorb sound. Illuminated pathways guided them through junctions, across transparent walkways, suspended over chasms filled with dormant machinery, and past chambers containing stabilized ecosystems or glowing energy conduits. Automated systems maintained the station, but they saw no other living beings, precursor or otherwise. It was a place built for a purpose, waiting patiently for millennia. At several points, their progress was halted by energy barriers shimmering across the corridor. Each time, the procedure was the same. Jason and Kaelira had to simultaneously place their hands, holding the tear crystals, onto designated panels. The barrier would dissolve, recognizing their unique combined biosignature as the keystone pair. Their reliance on each other, the necessity of their connection, was woven into the very fabric of the station's security. As they ran, the sounds of the external battle occasionally filtered through the station's structure, low, vibrating impacts. The shriek of stressed metal. The console's voice would periodically update them, its calm tone a stark contrast to the urgency of the situation. Hull integrity compromised in Sector Gamma 9. Defensive grid operating at 73% efficiency. Estimated time to void front arrival, standard cycle diminished. The pressure mounted with each update. They were racing against two clocks: the arrival of the void and the destruction of the Nexus by their own peoples. Kaelira stumbled, fatigue and the lingering pain from her wound catching up to her. Jason caught her, supporting her weight. "Just a little further. Kaelira," he encouraged, his own breathing heavy. "We can do this." She looked up at him, her golden eyes filled with exhaustion, but also determination. "I know." Together, they reached a massive doorway, intricately carved with the now familiar symbols of joined Valari and human figures. This was the entrance to the primary amplification core. As they reached for the activation panels beside the door, a section of the corridor wall behind them exploded inwards in a shower of debris and sparks. Valerius, the Valari Order commander, stepped through the breach, his silver armor scorched and dented, his faceplate cracked, revealing a snarl of fanatic fury. Several of his enforcers followed, weapons trained on Jason and Kaelira simultaneously. From the opposite direction, a squad of Human Federation Marines rappelled down from a compromised ceiling conduit, led by a stern-faced officer Jason vaguely recognized from news reports, Captain Eva Rostova, known for her ruthless efficiency. "Stand down." "Rhys," Rostova commanded, her pulse rifle aimed steadily. "You and the alien asset are coming with us. That technology is Federation property now." "Blasphemers," Valerius spat, raising his own energy weapon. "This sacred place will not be defiled by your greed. The aberration dies and the human will be purged. Once again, they were caught in the crossfire. But this time, there was nowhere left to run. The core chamber lay just beyond the door, the fate of the galaxy waiting. They don't understand, Kaelira pleaded, looking from Valerius to Rostova. The void is coming. We need to activate the network. Silence, creature, Valerius barked. Propaganda, Rostova stated coldly. Secure them. Both factions advanced, ignoring each other for the moment, focused entirely on their respective targets. Jason looked at Kaelira, a desperate idea forming. The station responded to them, to their combined energy. The activation, Jason said urgently to Kaelira. The merge. Maybe we don't need to be inside the chamber. Maybe just starting the sequence. It was a long shot, based on nothing but hope and the strange resonance they shared. Kaelira seemed to understand immediately. Fear warred with resolve in her eyes, but she nodded. This was their purpose. This was their only chance. Ignoring the advancing soldiers, they turned back to the massive door, placing their hands, still clutching the tear crystals, onto the activation panels. As their biosignatures were read, the door began to slide silently open, revealing the chamber beyond. Inside, a colossal crystal pulsed with unimaginable power, bathing the chamber in ethereal light. But they didn't step inside. Instead, focusing their intent, channeling the strange energy that flowed between them, amplified by the tear crystals and their deepening emotional bond, they initiated the first stage of the true biological merge, right there in the corridor. It wasn't a conscious act, more an instinctual surrender to the precursor design, allowing of their unique life energies to intertwine, resonate, and amplify. A wave of pure energy erupted from them, blindingly bright, washing over the corridor. It wasn't an attack, but a wave of sheer bioenergetic force, harmless yet overwhelming. Valerius, Rostova, and their soldiers were thrown back, stunned and disoriented, weapons clattering away. The energy wave flowed into the core chamber, striking the central crystal. The crystal pulsed violently, absorbing the energy, and the entire Nexus station hummed, vibrating with immense power. Throughout the station, systems surged online. On the console screens back in the receiving chamber, the activation sequence rapidly progressed. Stage 2. Stage 3. Final amplification. Then, disaster struck. From the ranks of the stunned Valerian forcers, one figure stirred faster than the others, not Valerius, but his second in command, a younger Valari whose eyes burned not with fanaticism, but with a different kind of ambition. He lunged forward, snatching one of the tear crystals that had fallen from Jason's grasp during the energy surge. The power should belong to the Order, he snarled, trying to shove past Jason and Kaelira towards the open core chamber door. Before Jason could react, another figure moved with surprising speed, a Valari scientist, unarmed, whom Jason recognized from the periphery of Valerius's command group back in Ethelgard. She had looked conflicted then, horrified by Valerius's extremism. Now, seeing the Keystone activation sequence initiated, seeing the potential for galactic salvation, she acted. She tackled the ambitious second in command, grabbing for the crystal. "No! Talek!" she cried. "You don't understand what you're doing. This is for all life." Talek, enraged, struck the scientist, sending her sprawling. He raised his sidearm to fire, but Jason reacted instantly, tackling Talek, sending them both crashing to the floor. The stolen crystal flew from Talek's grasp, skittering across the floor. Kaelira, despite her weakness, scooped it up, the scientist, whose name Jason later learned was Lyra, scrambled to her feet. Go, she urged Jason and Kaelira, gesturing towards the core chamber. Complete the sequence. I will try to reason with them. She turned to face the recovering Valari and human soldiers, her hands raised in a placating gesture, trying to buy Jason and Kaelira precious seconds. Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed Kaelira's hand, pulling her through the doorway into the blinding light of the core chamber, just as Rostova, recovering her senses, shouted, "Stop them! Don't let them reach the core!" The massive door slid shut behind them, sealing them inside with the colossal, pulsing heart of the Nexus. The sounds of renewed conflict outside faded, replaced by the overwhelming hum of the core crystal. Light bathed them, energy saturated the air, flowing into them. Drawing them towards the crystal's base were two indentations, perfectly shaped for Valari and human hands, awaited the final connection. This was it, the final stage. The complete biological and energetic union required to power the galactic shield. Looking at Kaelira, her blue skin luminous in the core's light, her golden eyes meeting his, Jason felt no fear, only certainty. Their journey, fraught with danger and discovery, had led them here. Their connection, born of anomaly and prophecy, was about to save countless lives. Ready? He asked softly. Kaelira smiled, a radiant expression that transformed her face. Together, she replied, hand in hand, holding the tear crystals that had guided them. They stepped forward, placing their free hands into the indentations at the base of the core crystal. The moment their skin made contact, the final circuit was complete. An unimaginable surge of energy flowed through them, merging their life forces, their unique genetic codes, their very essences intertwining with the Nexus core and the precursor network spanning the galaxy. It was a connection far beyond physical intimacy, a union of spirit and biology, amplified by the ancient technology. Their individual consciousnesses seemed to expand, touching the vast network, feeling the presence of the encroaching void, and pushing back with the combined power of their bond and the Nexus. Outside the core chamber, the fighting abruptly stopped. Valari and human soldiers alike looked up as the entire Nexus station blazed with light, a beacon against the encroaching darkness, far beyond the station. Stretching across parsecs in an instant, a luminous barrier of shimmering energy flared into existence. It solidified, a vast, intricate web of stabilized spacetime, meeting the edge of the terrifying void. The relentless advance of the null energy cascade halted, breaking against the barrier like waves against a shore. The consuming darkness was stopped. Inside the core, the intense light slowly subsided. Jason and Kaelira lowered their hands, breathless, leaning against each other for support. The core crystal still pulsed, but now with a steady, rhythmic beat. The heartbeat of a newly awakened guardian. They had done it. The door slid open. Standing there were Valerius, Rostova, Lyra the scientist, and soldiers from both sides. Their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and dawning realization. The animosity was momentarily forgotten, overshadowed by the sheer scale of what they had witnessed. Report, Rostova demanded, though her voice lacked its usual sharp edge, addressing the Nexus itself via her comm unit linked to the station's systems. The calm, genderless voice of the Nexus console echoed through the corridor. Nexus defensive network fully activated. Entropic cascade designated void successfully contained at barrier perimeter. Primary activation achieved via keystone pair, Valari sequence 7, human sequence 12. The console displayed a new message, translating it simultaneously for all present. Analysis complete. Originator contingency protocols identify 17 designated keystone species, pairs strategically seeded throughout galactic quadrants. Valari human pairing represents sector gamma activation. Further pairs required for full, resonance stability and potential cascade rollback. Your species are the first. 17 pairs, engineered by the precursors. Humanity and the Valari were just the beginning. A wave of understanding washed over the assembled soldiers and commanders. This wasn't just about survival, it was about a galactic legacy, a shared purpose none of them had ever conceived. Valerius looked at Kaelira, no longer with contempt, but with stunned confusion and grudging respect. Rostova looked at Jason, her military rigidity softening slightly as she comprehended the true nature of the assets she had been ordered to secure. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears, normal. Saline tears this time. "You saved us," Lyra said, her voice thick with emotion, addressing both Jason and Kaelira. "You fulfilled the prophecies. You showed us the way." Jason looked at Kaelira, their hands still linked. The ordeal was over, but their journey felt like it was just beginning. They were no longer fugitives, but symbols. Catalysts, not just for ancient technology, but for change between their peoples. "What happens now?" Jason asked, looking at the uneasy truce forming between the former enemies. Rostova and Valerius exchanged a long, uncertain look. The old hostilities wouldn't vanish overnight, but the shared threat, the revelation of a common origin and purpose, had irrevocably shifted the balance. "We report," Rostova said eventually. "There will be discussions." Valerius nodded curtly. "The order must reevaluate." He looked at Kaelira. "Your exile is ended. Your tears, they are not an aberration. They are a gift." Kaelira met his gaze steadily, then looked at Jason, a deep, unwavering affection in her eyes. "Our connection is the gift," she corrected gently. In the aftermath, Jason and Kaelira were no longer hunted, hailed as heroes, albeit cautiously at first by governments struggling to incorporate the reality of precursor intervention and galactic voids into their worldview. They became living symbols of interspecies cooperation, the recovered tear crystals, now understood as resonant keys and communication devices, facilitated tentative alliances between the Human Federation and factions within the Valari government, spearheaded by Lyra, who advocated for unity based on the Nexus revelations. Biogen Corp was exposed and dismantled, its illegal research forming a crucial part of understanding the precursor plan. Jason's name was cleared, his reputation restored, though he cared little for past accolades now. Their bond, tested by fire and deepened by cosmic purpose, blossomed into a profound love, a partnership recognized across stars. They chose not to settle into quiet retirement, but to embrace their role as the first keystone pair. Using the Nexus as a base, guided by the station's vast archives and the resonant crystals, they dedicated their lives to the next stage of the journey, seeking out the other 16 species pairs, uncovering more precursor sites, and strengthening the galactic network against future threats or the potential return of the void. Their journey continued, not as fugitives, but as explorers and guardians. Their union a constant beacon of hope, proving that even across the vast gulfs of space and biology, connection and understanding could not only save lives, but illuminate the path towards a shared future, a universe reborn from the edge of darkness. Their love story, once whispered in fearful legends of deadly tears, was now sung as an anthem of galactic unity, a testament to the power found not in isolation, but together. Canvas